Good morning, everybody. On this gray morning, we're happy to have you. Happy to know that so many of you are joining us for this conversation about real estate in a post-pandemic universe. And God willing, we will get to a post-pandemic universe at some point before too long. This is another of our virtual business partners roundtable at home events. And that's a series of conversations featuring business executives, government leaders, and other thought leaders from across our region. These programs have been popular at the Art Center for many years, and now as our campus is closed, we've recreated them in an online setting, and we've opened the conversations up to our members of our sister Newark organizations and others. And I'm glad that you have found the time to be with us this morning. I want to thank our series sponsor, PNC Bank, and our Thoughtful Business Partners Committee Chair, Joel Sherman of Atlantic Tomorrow's office, for making these events possible. Today's conversation, I know, will be an eye-opening look at how the pandemic has changed the real estate market in New Jersey. We've got four real estate developers whose work bridges residential, industrial, and commercial real estate, and they're here to speak with us about where and how people want to live, invest, and work in the midst of and in the aftermath of COVID-19. I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one, and you will see them as I do. Our first is Adenah Bayoh, who owns and operates several individual IHOP franchises across the state, with a fourth location set to open in Newark very soon, in less than a month, I think. And she founded the farm to table soul food restaurant Cornbread, which recently expanded into Pennsylvania through a partnership with Walmart. And she is also a real estate developer. Adenah partnered with two other developers to purchase the vacant Irvington General Hospital site and transform it into a new residential and retail community. Welcome, Adenah. We're happy you're here. We're also joined by Mimi Feliciano, founder and CEO of FEM Real Estate, a real estate development investment company based in Montville. FEM develops, owns, and manages commercial real estate nationwide. In 2020, she completed her passion project, South Beach at Long Branch, an award-winning oceanfront condominium development in the redevelopment zone of Long Branch. And she is also the great philanthropist who founded the Feliciano School of Business at Montclair State University. Paul Silverman is a principal of Silverman, the real estate development company he and his brother Eric founded in 1981. Silverman has restored historic landmarks, championed the development of mixed-use buildings, and created residential, commercial, office, and industrial spaces in New Jersey. And he is also helpful to all of us at the Art Center as a member of our real estate development committee. Finally, Joe Taylor is the president and CEO of Matrix Development Group, a firm he joined in 1981 when he was just 21 years old. He founded it. He's grown Matrix into one of the most successful full-service real estate investment companies in the industry. And over the years, his company has developed more than 35 million square feet of industrial space, 4 million square feet of office space, and thousands of residential homes. And I'm pleased that NJPAC's own real estate guru, Tim Lazura, our SVP of Real Estate and Capital Projects, will be moderating today's conversation. Many of you know that Tim was the president and CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority before he threw his lot in with us. And he has a wealth of knowledge about this market that is unmatched. So, all that said, a reminder to you of our timing. This is about a 45, 50-minute session, a half an hour of moderated Q&A with Tim and our panelists, followed by 15 or 20 minutes of questions from you. And if you'd like to ask our panelists a question, you can do so at any time by typing it into the Q&A box You'll find the Q&A box when you hover your cursor at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And that said, Tim, all yours, man.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, John. Good morning. Panelists, thank you for joining us today. It is an extraordinary panel, and I know this is going to be a terrific conversation. So let us just jump right in and spend just a minute, and I'll let you introduce yourself in a way that will kind of level set the conversation. Tell us a little bit about your portfolio, your business, what's keeping you busy, what projects you've been working on. And Mimi, you want to kick us off on and welcome us in that regard?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here with an esteemed group of panelists. So my portfolio consists of industrial and distribution and some retail. And I just completed a passion project, which is South Beach at Long Branch, which is 42 units of luxury oceanfront condo in Long Branch, which is a redevelopment area. And so we were very excited Long Branch has gone through a tremendous renaissance at this time. And we're excited to do something right on the shore that would attract a new lifestyle of live, work, play right there in New Jersey. We wanted to bring South Beach, a touch of South Beach to New Jersey. So we created that. So very excited about finishing that project. That's great.
That's great. And Joe, I feel like I've been working with you since you founded that company. But why don't you give us a quick overview of what's keeping you busy?
Well, we're doing a lot of industrial. We have expanded our roots from New Jersey up into New York City. We just finished a large 3.5 million square foot project in Staten Island. We're upstate New York, out in Pennsylvania. So we're building e-commerce type large distribution facilities wherever we can. Our portfolio still includes a fair amount of urban office in Newark, in Trenton, and in New Brunswick. In Newark, we own the Legal Center. I think we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on up there. And we've just recently completed a couple of residential projects and just about to start another one.
Terrific. And Adenah, you're very busy with both your entrepreneurship and real estate development. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so right now, the real focus is really real estate development, affordable housing in really high concentrated urban centers that have not really done the work in terms of how we kind of coexist and how do we design spaces that are for everyone. So my work is really around affordable housing, mixed income housing, including in there is my restaurant portfolio that also do because it brings jobs back right into those communities. As I built these projects, I want to leave something that can bring income to the cities and also provide living. So what's been really keeping me busy is we have about 3 affordable housing projects. There are 2 are just in the ground. We're finishing up one. We just leased up one. And I have 2 restaurants coming up, all 30 days apart, downtown Newark. So pretty busy there.
Yeah, I'd say so. And Paul, I was actually in your fair city last night having dinner, and it looks like it's a bustling metropolis. What say you in your little portfolio there?
Thank you. Thank you, Tim and John and Chelsea and everyone at NJPAC for putting this together today. It's great to be here. Yeah, my brother Eric and I started developing real estate in 1981 in Jersey City. Found an old 14-unit empty apartment building and put our heart and soul into it. And, about a year later, in 3 weekends, rented all 14 apartments and really changed our lives to create a company where our company tagline is building neighborhoods, because what we do is we really jump in a neighborhood with both feet and fill it with interesting retail and schools and restaurants and apartments and really try to change the feeling of a neighborhood. It's very small, concentrated, micro focus. And we've stayed in Hudson County, primarily Jersey City, but a little bit in Kearney and a little bit in North Bergen, but primarily downtown Jersey City, and really making an impact there. We'll talk later, but the retail is a big part of what we do, and having these interesting, enthusiastic entrepreneurs like Adenah and like my colleagues here on the call to set up really interesting retail. So it's an exciting time.
Let's stay on that. let's stay on that, because you are known for creating a community and having all these great events and amenities. How has that changed in a contactless world in pandemic, and how is it going to continue to change, do you think?
No, it's interesting. Yes, many of our retailers had to close for a few months. The governor's order to close the non-essential retail. So a lot of those stores had to close. They've all been able to reopen now. The restaurants prospered. We allowed them to expand as far and wide on sidewalks as they wanted to. A place like Roomba Cabana pretty much doubled their capacity by taking over this entire sidewalk and courtyard area. And most of our restaurants have really expanded their outdoor dining, which gave a lot of life to the streets as well. So I think people enjoyed that scene of outdoor dining and music and the excitement on the streets rather than a boarded up building. So I think it was a plus. All of our retailers have reopened. A couple exceptions. Mathnasium Tutoring Center still has not reopened. He's doing everything virtually, but just about everybody else has reopened and is clawing their way back to profitability.
And Adenah, you really have a unique view of this, having both the development landlord relationship of the retail and owning your own retail operations in Cornbread and IHOP. What impact has it had with on kind of both sides of that ledger for you, and how's it working out?
So I think for me is when I look at the pandemic, I always say that my focus have always been urban spaces. How do we go in these urban centers and operate spaces that are extremely, extremely thoughtful and that can bring value to these communities? So when the pandemic kind of happened, it was all panic, extreme panic. Literally, everyone was thinking, what's going to happen now? What blessed us really is having the relationship and having already the third-party delivery services. I think for my company, I am #1 for IHOP in terms of third-party delivery and pickup. And for Cornbread, 60% of our revenue come from deliveries. So I was able to quickly ramp up and be able to say, okay, let's pivot. What I am seeing is a lot of my legacy restaurants that are primarily 40 years mom and pop weren't able to quickly pivot. So when I sit on the Restaurant Association board, I'm seeing a lot of those legacy restaurants not really recovering at the pace as, say, a Cornbread that's already at 60% delivery. So that's been really, really challenging, having my restaurant do well, but really seeing other restaurants that aren't able to quickly pivot to delivery and third-party services. Really see revenue 90% down, 80% down. It's been a challenge.
So do you think this is a trend that will continue, that restaurateurs will build in the delivery piece of the business as part of their core and no longer kind of an add-on? Is it now going to be, is there going to be a baseline for the future, do you think?
Absolutely. You cannot survive right now. My 2 restaurants that I've kind of built downtown Newark, literally we stopped and we redesigned. We added pickup window from the outside. We added parklets for outside dining. Every restaurant, even in IHOP, they're asking us to pivot, because even when the governor did announce 25% more capacity, we just haven't seen the consumer come at the pace we want them to for indoor dining. Everyone is still afraid of this disease and what effect it can have if you're staying in a closed space.
Right. So speaking of pivoting, Mimi, you bring this project South Beach in Long Branch to market. How's the pandemic shaped your marketing and your market for that product?
Originally, as soon as it happened, our project is already focused on being outdoors, people living outdoors. And it has, you know, big views of the ocean, and it has oversized decks. So we really focused on things people don't want, which is being close and or in sharing hallways or small elevators. And we focused on what we do have, which is, like I said, large elevators, big open spaces, big glass windows. You could almost feel like you're outside when you're indoors, which is very cool. And we have a large common area space. So it feels empty all the time. There's 42 units. It's a boutique tower. And actually it's at 2 towers. And that's what we really started to focus on, what people do want. They want privacy. They want to feel safe. So, you know, we don't even have, like I said, we don't have hallways. The elevators open right to their units. So you do get a sense of privacy. So
who are these people? Who are the people who you see taking you up on the opportunity?
Well, I think because so many people have come out of New York City, they've bought a lot of homes that were sitting in, you know, in New Jersey that couldn't sell. A lot of people wanted to downsize. In general, we have a market that's 50 and over. Although we're not limited to 50 and over, but that seems to be our market. There are many people that lived in the area even that wanted to downsize and live with a maintenance-free lifestyle on the ocean, and they couldn't sell their homes. Now there's this huge wave of people coming from New York City. A lot of these homes got sold. Now these people have the opportunity to take the next step in their life and have more of a live, work, play balance with a, you know, that kind of lifestyle on the shore. So we're seeing that group. And we're also seeing people that want second homes, that want a place just in the summer. A lot of them go to Florida or somewhere else in the winter. So they're just there in the summertime. And we see that those are the 2 groups that we see coming to Long Branch.
And Paul, you see a similar exodus from New York into Jersey City, the quote unquote 6th borough, or is there something else going on there?
Yes, we do see a lot of Manhattan people and Brooklyn people coming to Jersey City. A little bit more life. There's no boarded up stores. We haven't had any looting, any crime problems at all. And having the outdoor dining has brought a lot of life to the neighborhood. So probably half of our new residents are people coming out of Manhattan and Brooklyn right now.
Wow. And how about Adenah, on your residential population? What are you seeing in your buildings? Is there any trends that are progressing from this?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend that I sort of see is that how in one of my buildings is 114 units. We have 80% of the units are affordable and 20% of the units are market. And when the pandemic sort of happened, we started seeing a really big contrast. What was happening was we saw that most of our affordable tenants were your essential workers. Those who are the ones are at the grocery cashiers, the Amazon workers. So we saw really rent in those units really stay paced. They weren't really missing rent, but was showing up at work a lot of time. And the risks that come with that, especially at the height of this thing here, was really worrisome, right? And then what we saw was, and what I kind of really, the dichotomy of this whole thing was, we were all experiencing the same pandemic, the same storm, but some of us was experiencing it in different boats. So that really have really re-engaged my passion for how do we do housing? What does housing look like? What does housing being built equitably look like? So that was the biggest contrast that stuck out to me.
Right. Some of those essential workers are probably working in your buildings, Joe. You know, e-commerce was already shaking up the retail environment and the logistics environment, and I can only tell from personal experience, since boxes show up at my house every day now, that has progressed faster. And how is that affecting your portfolio and your business?
Tim, I'll answer in just 1 second, but if I could just remark to the panelists that have just gone, you know, as horrible as this pandemic experience has been at every level, there are glimpses of things that are very positive that may stick around for a long time. Some of them just talked about outdoor dining. There are towns in New Jersey that I've experienced, like Morristown and Summit and Princeton, where they close down streets to let people out, walk around and dine outside and keep the cars out of downtown. I mean, that's a fantastic step forward. Takeout, all these things. So I'm hoping that when we get to the post-pandemic, some of those things actually stay. As relates to our industrial business, our e-commerce business, as I'm sure most of your guests know, it was expanding very rapidly well before the pandemic hit. The buildings are getting bigger and bigger. The inside workings of the buildings are more and more sophisticated. And the good news on that is the more sophisticated the material handling equipment gets, the more employees they need to run it. So, years ago, there was this concern that Amazon was going to come along. They were going to have robots and they weren't going to hire people. But the more robots they have, the more people they need. So what we have seen is an ongoing expansion of that, not just on Amazon, but Walmart and Lowe's and Wayfair and others. And the biggest change really in the last 9 months, I think, has been the levels of testing, the levels of security, safety, and interactions in the buildings that take place. And when a shift starts at an Amazon, you can have 2,000 people coming in more or less at one time. And so the way they've managed that has been quite interesting to see. But the buildings are getting bigger. The retailers want to get closer to everyone that's on this call to get their boxes to Tim's back deck as quickly as possible. And I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, Joe made a great comment that I'd love to get everybody's reaction to. Is one of the things that are being implemented during the moment in the moment of the pandemic that will endure past it. I think, Paul, you were talking about some of the things that you're doing in Jersey City that were kind of supplanting or augmenting some of the community building. You'd mentioned jugglers and magicians, and it sounded like you had a 3-ring circus at one point. But what are those things you think might be sticking around, if any, and what other things might be there?
We like to think it's more like a cruise ship instead of a circus. So, a lot of activities. So yeah, we're doing a lot of programming for our residents to keep them engaged, because so many people working from home. So we've got dance classes, we've got exercise classes, tarot card reading. We have a famous makeup artist who's not doing any films right now, so she's in town and she's doing hair and makeup for residents for free. Our dance classes for children. We had a magician on the rooftop, so it is like a cruise ship and a lot of entertainment. But the other things we're doing on the fly, we're building an apartment building right now, 60 residential units and a commercial space and office space financed by M&T Bank. And there we moved the generator on the roof. We moved some of the air conditioning units to make a bigger roof deck. We relocated some of the private terraces for apartments to make more outdoor space. On the 6th floor, we're able to add a whole new roof terrace by moving some mechanical equipment. So just trying to get more and more outdoor space, which I think will stay for the future, and that'll be what people will want. So we're able to make some of those changes on the fly, so that next year, June, July, when we start renting out the building, people will enjoy that outdoor activities.
And I think what strikes me is point of sale retail, which is part of your buildings, and obviously Adenah and Mimi, you have different types of retail in your portfolios. I'd love to hear from both of your perspectives. What do you think post-pandemic retail looks like in a downtown setting or an urban setting like you have, Adenah, and some of the more suburban things that you have, Mimi, and how do they look? What's the viability of them in the future? And are there any changes into those that are going to persevere? Mimi, why don't you go first?
Okay. So we have some retail and that's, that's what you want to focus on. Our retail, I think that some of them are gone, they're just not coming back. And we have, and some of them are, like, for example, we have a kinder care, and and that type of, you'd think that people need the the childcare, and yet they can't. Their margins are so thin that they just can't make it with all the requirements that they need with COVID. I mean, they have to have some major changes from the government, some kind of support, because that's a particular retail that, one of ours went dark and they just gave up the lease. They'd rather pay their way out. They don't want to renew. Then we have things like, pharmacies, CVS, and they continue to expand. Walgreens, they seem to be here to stay. With regard to medical office, I think that's here to stay. But I have to tell you, a lot of the medical office, you'd think they would have been busy, but they were empty. They had a hard time because so much of medical office was not emergency. It was, care that's elective surgery, or it's optional. So we had to give those people breaks. We had to give discounts, but they extended the leases because they do believe there's a big need for that in the long haul. So it's a mixed bag. Depends on what, I think. That's
depends, right?
my
Yeah.
step.
One of the things that's going to stick around after this pandemic, specifically to Mimi's point, is telehealth. Right, telehealth has expanded dramatically. I don't see us going backwards. It's a great convenience for so many of us. So that may well have an impact on what Mimi and I and Adenah do as relates to medical office buildings, in our parks or around our urban settings.
Right.
On the retail, if I could just
Yeah.
add on the retail side of things, I just heard a statistic yesterday that in the second quarter of 2020, at the height of the pandemic, e-commerce retail amounted to only 16.7% of all retail transactions in the country. So e-commerce is still an extraordinarily small part, a surprisingly small part of all the retail that we have. So retail is absolutely robust and is going to come back. What it looks like as it comes back and what types come back and where they want to be in malls versus downtowns where everyone can walk to them is going to be the challenge, I think, and where we got to be a little imaginative. But it is still a predominantly hands-on real estate, click and pay world.
So it's good to hear that, because we all know the lifeblood of a city is street life, and storefronts
Right.
contribute so much to that. And I think that without that, it's a completely different experience in the city. So I'm glad to hear you think that. I'm pivot a little bit. Everybody here has a portfolio, and we hear a bit about the tenants struggling to pay, whether they're commercial or residential. From an owner side, how does that impact your business? And does that cut differently from industry? And is this the ticking time bomb that's going to lag and blow up in everybody's face like it did in 2008? So I don't. Maybe Joe, you want to start us off on that? Go ahead.
Well, there are, in my opinion, a couple different sides to that. On the rental collection side of things, on the office and the industrial, we've been pleased with the very high percentage of rental receipts. So we certainly had to work with some of our tenants, our customers, our partners, to help them even out those payments over the year. But by and large, rental collections have been very strong for us. I will say, though, that I think that that impact may again be something we feel months down the road. The population in our office buildings is down dramatically, and what that comes back to and settles out as is going to be really interesting come next year. A lot of people aren't even going back until next summer. So and then when they do come back, just like telehealth, people have also gotten used to working from home. We joked earlier that Paul hasn't put a tie on since March. I don't even know if I have ties anymore. So I don't know how much of that's really going to happen. That will have an impact on office buildings, and that will have an impact on tax collections for these towns, and it's going to have an impact on banks and on where mortgages can and will get served and serviced. As you know, Tim, from your past experience, we already have some CMBS rumblings in the markets So it's an area of unsettling times. That said, collections now are pretty good. The impact, I think, is a year down the road.
You think corporate America shares any responsibility in getting people back in their offices? And do governments and leaders of our cities and states, they play any role in getting people back in the office, and should they play any role in getting people back in the office?
My personal opinion is that that as an employer, we have 50 employees here in our home office. As an employer, the first obligation is to the employees and to their families and to their health. So whether they're working from home or whether they're working here in the office is an individual issue, and what their level of comfort is with the technology. So everyone needs their employees to perform, but I don't think corporate America is an obligation to force them back downtowns. I think that the leadership in these towns, and I'm not speaking about New York City so much, but in New Jersey, in our cities and our towns, I think they have an obligation to create an environment and maybe even some incentives to keep the retail going, to keep all the services there, so that as people do reemerge, those services are there for them, and it'll keep their streets, lively and
Right.
safe places to go.
All right, so we're already probably a little bit into the Q&A. So let's just see before, and I did want to follow up on a little more, but let's see if there's any Q&A on here. Chelsea, do you want to take a look to see? I know we have some questions coming through. I can see the numbers popping up there. Anything that you want to hit us with?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, panelists. Our first question comes from Joel Sherman, who is the chair of our Business Partners Committee. He asks, what are malls doing to stay current and viable during this time? Do you see those spaces turning to residential in any way? Adenah,
you repositioned a healthcare facility, which is not all that different than a mall. What do you think? You think those are good repositioned opportunities to redevelop?
Yeah, I think it all depends on location, right? So most often time, the proximity of the mall to the downtown can actually work, right? You don't want to take a mall that's in West Bubble somewhere and say, let me put housing here. That's just not going to work, because one thing we all know, there can be this mass exodus of people leaving cities and things like that. People love the city life. They like the convenience of being close to transit, restaurants, and all of those things that make us, at our core, American. We're social beings, right? So yes, I think there will be a reckoning of repositioning of malls, because most of these malls already weren't doing well in terms of where it was before the pandemic. So if you see a lot of retailers that are now closing, it would, the pandemic just fast forward that for them, right? Most of them was already in trouble, because most of them hadn't pivoted to an e-commerce model to have both. So, but I think that conversation, all of it is on the table. But one thing I do want to point out, right? And I think this is what we're not talking about, especially from my position, my perspective that I stay right now. When you hear people talk and there's this mass exodus of people leaving cities and things like that, urban centers are still very desirable, extremely desirable, right? So when I see an investor, what Warren Buffett says, when they run, you come. My biggest fear for urban centers right now is going to be this big rise of big money, because right now capital for some regard is cheap. It's, access to it is not bad. You're going to see these institutional investors coming in these urban centers that aren't really there, and it's going to escalate the gentrification conversation that's already happening in these urban centers. That's sort of what I see.
Right.
Hey, Tim, I would add on the mall discussion, there's a huge threat to these malls, in addition to what we've been going through, of these movie theaters going out of business. If these movie theaters go out, if AMC disappears from functionally disappears from these malls, all the secondary retail, all the restaurants that are there to service that are really going to struggle. So I think malls have a serious repositioning issue here going forward. beyond
Well,
just.
and that's, yeah, right. And that's another dynamic in the marketplace with streaming services and how much
Right.
have they replaced, you know, the big screen, and is that a trend that's here to stay? And that is a question that I think the jury is still out. And, you know, the death of the movie screens has been, you know, overly estimated many times. So it'll be interesting to see how that industry shakes out. But I do agree with you. Those are anchors, and they will definitely affect the areas. Chelsea, you want to hit us with another one?
Yeah. So next question, what, if any, impact has the current interest rate environment and forward guidance from the Federal Reserve Bank had on your businesses?
And that is a great question. I think one, and Joe had mentioned the difference between 2008 and where you couldn't get debt capital to save your life, and now it's available at ultra low rates. And you know, there's really two sides of that coin that Adenah just pointed out: the gentrification side, plus the fact that you might be able to develop projects that weren't developable. So Paul, does the availability and the interest rate low cost borrowing, does that change the way you're thinking about developing your next building?
Yes, absolutely. Having that low interest rate helps quite a bit. And it's interesting, I was with Kurt Steinheld from Provident Bank Monday night talking about the same subject and asked him what it's like for him now. And he talked about how in the past you'd analyze a business, but now you're analyzing the world around that business to see how the impact is. So much bigger global, rather than looking at something in Jersey City, you're now looking at the world and how it affects Jersey City. It's pretty interesting. But having that low interest rate and having that access to capital, you know, has really been good.
Okay. Chelsea, we probably enough for one or two more, do you think?
Sure. So our next question comes from Linda Harrison, who's the head of the New York Museum of Art, our neighbor. She asks, the Regional Planning Association has updated their transit plan to advocate for single-family housing in various towns and cities to be converted into housing for 2 or more families. Do you think that this is a viable option for developers and affordable housing?
So,
boy, yeah, go ahead, Adenah. Go ahead. That's a mouthful. There's a lot of things there. Go ahead.
so I think, again, if you look at a lot of the zoning in a lot of these towns, most of the zoning was intentionally zoned the way it was to keep a certain population out. And what's happening now is that these same very towns are going to you have the Monroe conversation that's happening. Most of these towns in New Jersey either have a Monroe situation where they aren't either providing enough affordable housing stock for their resident, or they're staying in the way of affordable housing development in their township. But not just that, they also are density averse. So when you have a town that 100% of my zoning is one family, well, what that speaks to is the average Black and brown family, or we're talking about middle income family sometimes, cannot afford the taxes, the mortgage that associated with a single family house. So what that means is maybe I can have a mother and daughter. My daughter can live next door. I live there. But those options, really, these townships are not really welcoming to, right? So it is a conversation that as we go in this pandemic and we see the effect of everything, housing policies, lending policy, and how the bad effect of those policies have got us in the boat that we're in right now, is we have to look at everything and put everything on the table for discussions.
You're right. You're spot on with everything you said there. And the other thing below, the next level down in that question, is transit. And you know, right now I just had a conversation with the Port Authority. I think PATH is at 10% occupancy, right? Ridership now, right? So Paul, are people getting back? And first of all, so it affects mobility, it affects density. But if nobody gets back on trains again, all of that whole thing is shot. So Paul, what do you see happening with the PATH and our transit systems, and how does the pandemic going to affect that?
Well, certainly we need to get the ridership back up, but we need the offices to open up in Manhattan for that to happen. But we do have residents that are taking the PATH train regularly, seeing friends in New York, getting to New York for doctor's appointments or for restaurants that are open. And they said it's a comfortable ride. I've not been on the PATH train myself, but the residents I've spoken to have been on it and feel comfortable riding it, that it's clean and not crowded. So you feel comfortable being there. Everyone is masked and they're enforcing that carefully. So it will come back. It'll take time, but it will come back.
And Joe, you know, for years we were talking about transit-oriented development as a savior for all kinds of reasons in New Jersey. And as Adenah points out, those are, generally speaking, that's targeted at our second-tier cities and other locations in the state. Is that something that is still going to have traction, or have we been set back 10 years in that conversation?
Well, my guess is that we certainly have had a setback. I don't anticipate that being a decade of a setback, because I do think that New York City will fill back up again. I do think people will start to commute again, assuming Jersey Transit and PATH keep their cleanliness standards up and so I mean I think it'll come back. I still think TOD in New Jersey is a critical part of a lot of these secondary cities and their redevelopment. So I hope it survives. I think it will, but I think it's on pause for now.
Yeah, I think it's it's a fascinating conversation. I don't know, we're up against it. I'd like to have everybody to have an opportunity to just give a crystal ball kind of look into the future and tell us what you think about the real estate market and what the future looks like. And for no particular order, Adenah, why don't you just kick us off and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think for me, impact investment is the thing that is most dear to me. You have a lot of people that are seeing what really this pandemic have really unearthed about how we, as citizens coexist, right? I think for me is how do we, we sit in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey is probably, I think, top 10 most segregated state in the country, right? And it's 2020, right? So I think for me is really building spaces in how we build spaces with diversity of income, diversity of color, thinking about special needs housing, thinking about and understanding that diversity is what really make us this great nation. Everyone says America is this great country, but what really great about us is our diversity, what we all bring to the table. So my really crystal ball is to how can I create a space that speak to all of those things, and also think about the most marginalized people in our society, and how do we work in terms of housing and real estate to have a conversation about that in real estate, especially affordable housing.
It is topical and it's appropriate and it's well thought out. And I hope more and more people have that conversation, because I think it's really, really important. Paul, what does your crystal ball say?
Oh, I'll kind of talk about what Adenah's saying. Jersey City is a amazingly diverse community, and one of the things we're doing is really redoubling our efforts with our philanthropy. Our company philanthropy focuses on education of the youth and on the arts. So we're really strong on that. Groups like New City Kids, great after school program, continue to support them. We just started a youth foundation of Jersey City to help support the youth. So really working on that to make a stronger community. But I do invite each of you participants and people that are listening in, come down to Jersey City, check out downtown, Grove Street, Hamilton Park. A lot of life in our streets right now, whether it be shopping, walking through the beautiful parks, or dining, a lot of outdoor dining, and then soon to be a lot of indoor dining. So we invite you to Jersey City. So thank you.
Great. And Mimi, what's the Feliciano family say about the future?
Well, I'm very excited about the future. In many ways, I think the pandemic has made me reevaluate, what I'm doing and where I want to go. I think a lot of people, just want more balance in their life. And as I do, I'm excited about the fact that this pandemic, I think, the fact that people could work from home and it gives us more flexibility to work from home. I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying more time with my family. I see, I'm optimistic that the pandemic, I think it's changed a lot of people. It's changed some of their values and where they want to live. And, we were saying about the cities, yes, there's some issues in New York with the crime, but I think, I'm optimistic in New Jersey about the lifestyle. We really have beautiful, environment in New Jersey. It's a lovely, parts of it, there's so much diversity of space, and you really can have that balance of living and working in a great environment. And I'm optimistic for the future.
Great.
For that
And
balance.
Joe, yeah, absolutely. And Joe, we've been working at this a long time. What do you think? Where are we in the?
Well, first of all, let me say that I completely agree with what Mimi just said. I think that, and this isn't necessarily just real estate. This is just citizens of New Jersey. I think that there's been a change in the dynamic in so many parts of New Jersey. I think we are looking out for our neighbors more. I think our towns are more important to us and our interaction with others in those towns. So maybe we're going to New York City less, but we're going into downtown, Morristown more. And I think that, so I think it has changed the family balance. It has changed my dog, who I don't know how the dog's going to get by when I go back to work full time. I mean, we have major issues here to talk about, and I think that, but I think that all in all, again, if you look for positives to come out of this huge adversity, and that, by the way, is what developers do. Developers always find a challenge and they find a way, or a crisis, and find a way to make value out of that and turn it around to the benefit of the community and of their investors and others. And I think that's where we're going to go in New Jersey. And I think if we watch this year, if we watch the end of this year and we look at donations and contributions in downtowns, in our urban centers that need it, I think we're going to see that giving, and I hope we're going to see that giving throughout New Jersey is at an all-time high. So that's a personal prognostication. As for you and I, Tim, how long we've been working together, which is a long time, it's going to come as no surprise to you. I think it's extraordinarily important here in New Jersey, whether it's the urban or in the suburban, that we do a better job of keeping up on our infrastructure. It creates a lot of jobs. It creates mobility. It's an investment in the long-term nature of our state. And I hope that we're able to do that, even though times are extraordinarily tight at the public level.
Yeah. Well, as advertised and as expected, this was a fascinating conversation. I thank you on behalf of NJPAC for all of your time. Joel, thank you for your leadership in this Business Partners Roundtable. PNC, thank you for your sponsorship. Couldn't do it without you, of course. And stay tuned. We will be shortly announcing our next installment in the series, which I am sure will be just as good, if not better than this. So thank you for everybody, and look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.